All right, good day, everybody. So this week we'll be talking about social and cultural structures and political, legal, and regulatory environments. Okay, so sounds a little tough, but it's not. Here we go. Okay, so what is culture? Right? Culture is the characteristics and knowledge of a particular group of people, a language, religion, cuisine, social habits, music, and art. Okay, guys, very simple definition. What is culture? Culture is a shared pattern of behaviors and interactions. Um, so, like I said, encompasses religion, food, what we hear, how we hear it, our language, marriage. So, cultures are different in different parts of the world. You have cultures in India where weddings, a lot of them are arranged, and over here in the U.S. and Canada, and people think arranged marriages are ridiculous. Um, um, there's cultures in Africa where uncles marry their nieces and stuff like that. That's also people see that as a very as a very wrong thing. You have people who are in Saudi Arabia. You have women who just are now allowed to drive, but before weren't allowed to drive. They didn't really have a lot of freedom. They have to cover themselves up, and now it's all changing. But the U.S. and North America, Europe, and even India, Pakistan were like, that's not right, right? So cultures are obviously different in different countries. So now, if you're trying to take your company global, and you want to market your company globally, you obviously have to take into consideration. It's not as easy as just, okay, let's just replicate what we have in our country. It's a lot more different, right? You have to make sure that you know what country you're going into, what their norms are, what their cultures are, what their company cultures are like, how women and men behave together, what their religious is it religiously run, or is it religiously dominant, or is it more culturally dominant? So you got to look at a bunch of these things, right? So market has to study about the local culture in depth before offering a product to them, right? Because every marketing promotion has done to promote the product that is communicating feature to the customers, influence customers to buy it. To have an effective communication, one must send the message according to the receiver's culture, customs, and learning processes. Okay, guys. So I do sales, right? And for me, in order to get a sale, I have to make sure that the person that I'm talking to, I can connect with. Okay? If I can't connect to that person, 9 out of 10 times, I won't get the sale. So sales about you don't have to connect with them on an interpersonal level. You have to connect with them on a cultural level. They need to feel you and understand you and know that this person that I'm talking to understands me. This person understands what I'm looking for. This person understands. He sees the world similar to the way I see it. So that really helps me in my sales. Same exact thing as if you're going to be doing any type of global marketing. You need to know who your target audience is. You need to know how to get to them, how to get them to like your product, how to get them to like your company, right? So it's a lot of that stuff. Okay, so let's give an example of that, of what we just talked about. Okay, so Disneyland, everyone knows Disneyland, right? Disneyland is extremely um, famous, and in Florida you have full Disney World, and it's extreme huge attraction. It attracts many millions and millions and millions of families. Okay, so but when they started their journey in France, they faced a tremendous problem, fell in billions of dollars of debt. Why? Why did Disneyland work in the U.S. but not in France? It also earned a lot of money in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Japan. So why was it in France that they didn't get a lot of money? So studies showed that French managers didn't like how U.S. managers were operating, and the culture was very different. So the French did not want to work with the U.S. guys because the U.S. culture is very different. So, for example, when I was working in Quebec, it was extremely difficult to work with the people that I was working with. Why? Because I brought my work ethic, which is a Toronto, Ontario, North American work ethic. In Quebec, these guys, their favorite phrase is in the U.S. and Ontario, everywhere around the world, people live to work. They live to work. Okay? So they're only alive just to work. But here in Quebec, we work to live. We only work so we can live our life. That's the difference that they were talking about. It was very difficult for me because when you're running a multi-million-dollar business, you need things to move at a very efficient, rapid pace. But these guys weren't doing it. So our company was losing millions and millions and millions of dollars because the Quebecois didn't want to do anything about it. So we were having huge issues there. So same thing is happening with Disneyland, right? Disneyland went into France, and the French people there said, you know what, we don't like working for these U.S. guys. We don't want to do what they want us to do, and the whole thing just started losing to billions and billions of dollars. So it's not only France. In Saudi Arabia, out of every 10 U.S. managers, 8 are replaced. Why? Within a few months of just joining, they're replaced. Why are they replaced? U.S. people who come from the U.S., they can't live in Saudi Arabia for too long. The lifestyle is extremely different. You have to deal with not a lot of freedom. You know, people bring their families there, they bring their wives there, and their wives are stuck at home all day. All they can do is shop, and you know, they can't even go outside properly because they're gonna get howled on, and these religious police will come and tell them, don't do this, don't do that. So U.S. managers a lot of them don't stay in Saudi Arabia for a long time because they can't deal with it. So it's because they fail to cope with the Saudi culture and customs. It is what it is. High context culture. Okay, so there's two types of cultures. Okay, so high context relies on implicit communication and non-verbal cues. In high context communication, a message cannot be understood without a great deal of background information. So, Asian, African, Arab, Central European, Latin American cultures are considered to be high context cultures. Okay, so the easiest example that I can give you of this is when I was living in Saudi Arabia. I used to live there when I was young. I lived there from grade 1 till grade 8. And my parents are still there. They still work there. I moved here when I was 15. So with Saudi Arabia, when I was living there, I picked up on the language. I picked up on Arabic, like a few words. But for me, I used to hang out with a lot of Arab people, and I realized Arab people talk more with their expressions and with their facial expressions, their hand gestures, their body language, more than the way they speak. So they're very colorful when they're talking, and they got a lot of movement and stuff like that. So I always know what's happening. So while I was sitting there, I could pick up on a few words. When I pick up on a few words and I see their body language, I know exactly what they're talking about. So when we're sitting in a group setting and people are speaking Arabic and stuff, and then they don't have to translate it. Some people are just like, oh, Waleed, this is what they're saying. I'm like, no, I got it. I know what they're saying. I know what we're talking about. Like, I'll laugh at jokes and stuff, and they'd be like, hey, you understand that? I'm like, yeah, I understand that. They're like, okay, what do we say? And I'll explain to them, like, you guys are talking about this, this. They're like, oh my God, how do you know that? Like, how do you know Arabic? How do you know Urdu and English? Urdu is also the same. People love talking with their expressions, right? And when you're from Pakistan or India, people love talking with their expressions, so I know what's happening. But when you talk to people here in the U.S. and Canada, their thing is, they don't want to show a lot of emotion. Where we come from, emotions, we show our emotions and we show it in the way we speak. Uh, okay, so we'll get to the U.S. and Canada one later, but let's continue talking about the high context cultures about Asia, Africa, all that stuff. So association, right? Relationships build slowly and depend on trust. Productivity depends on relationships and the group process. An individual's identity is rooted in family, culture, work. Okay, so that's the association. Interaction, nonverbal, like we said. So a lot of gestures, facial expressions, eye movements are significant, right? Like I said, verbal messages are indirect. Communication is seen as an art form or a way of engaging someone. Disagreement is personalized, and a person is sensitive to conflict expressed in someone else's nonverbal communication. Territoriality. Space is communal. People stand close to each other around the same space. Temporality. Everything has its own time. Not everything is as easily scheduled. As you know, if you know about any Indian or Pakistani wedding that you go to, everybody's late. Nobody wants to get there on time. Say 6 o'clock. Make sure you start your wedding at 7:30 because that's when the people are going to be there. Learning. Multiple sources of information are used. So they like to observe others and they then try to do the exact same thing as accurately as possible. Now we're going to switch to the from high context culture to a low context culture. Okay, so it relies on explicit communication. So it has to be very, very in detailed communication. So information is spelled out and defined. Cultures with Western European roots, such as US and Australia, are considered to be low context cultures. The thing about the US and Canada is what I realized. The reason why I became so comfortable and I've had a lot of success working here in the US and Canada is because I've seen the way people, I've seen what people like and what they don't like that live here. Okay? If you're a person that's moving too much, you're too fidgety, you talk fast, you're blah, 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 it's a huge turnoff for the people here in the US and Canada. What they like, because their whole life they've been taught to just sit still, sit in class, make sure you're there on time, you work, you listen to the teacher, you don't misbehave, stuff like that. It's a lot of discipline here. So when I'm talking to people who are high level executives and I'm trying to land these, $1 million deals or whatever I'm doing, you have to kind of mock or imitate what they're doing, right? So you have to be calm. Even if you have emotions running high, you can't let your emotions get the best of you. You have to sit there, you have to listen. You got to look at what the guys are talking about and don't say anything that's not directly related to what you guys are talking about. So for example, I was sitting in a meeting with my boss, right? We're in a meeting with Sobeys. Sobeys is a huge grocery chain here in Canada. So I ended up getting a meeting with Sobeys because we wanted to give them some equipment. So I sat. So it was a very big thing for us because Sobeys is a huge contract. You could have made millions of dollars off of it. But I was still a little new to the company, so I brought the president of the company with me. So I sat there, we were sitting there, and in the meeting, the president, one of the head executives at Sobeys asked a question, said, "Hey, your equipment, is it, you guys haven't done a lot of grocery stores before, so we get a lot of liquid waste that we get rid of. How does your equipment work with the liquid waste because you guys haven't done grocery stores before?" So the very easy answer in my head, which I didn't want to say it because my boss was there and he already started talking, so I don't want to talk over him. So what he started saying was, he started explaining our equipment. He started saying, well, our equipment has this, has a T seal, has all that, blah, 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 and he just kept on going. And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, man, we're not going to get this deal. Because they want to obviously give it to somebody who has grocery store experience before. All he should have said, all my boss should have said was, we have a hospital that we just did. We do multiple hospitals. Hospitals have the most dangerous wet waste. They have radioactive sometimes, dangerous chemicals, hormones, pharmaceuticals that that are tossed into the garbage and tossed into these compactors. So how, if our equipment is standard, national standard for hospitals, how come it can't be for grocery stores? Like if we make sure that nothing leaks and spills at hospitals, how is it not for grocery stores? So that was what was in my head. I should have said that, but I was too new in the company. I didn't want to overstep on my boss and whatever. Anyways, long story short, we didn't get the deal. We lost the Sobeys deal. Um, at that point, we did. Just this year, Sobeys asked us to put in some equipment at one of their warehouses. So we're in the door with Sobeys, but we're not. We don't have all their stores. But it was a long journey, and I learned a lot that day. I learned a lot, especially just watching my boss screw that up completely. You have to be right direct to the point. Okay, so association. Relationships begin and end quickly. Very true. Over here, it happens all the time. Nonverbal elements are not explicit, right? So communication is seen as a way of exchanging information, ideas, and opinions. Disagreement is depersonalized, the focus on rational, not personal solutions. Right? Territoriality, space is compartmentalized, right? So everyone just wants their own space. Privacy is important, so people stand farther apart. Temporality, events and tasks are scheduled and to be done on time. Change is fast, and time is a commodity to be spent or saved. One's time is own's time. Okay, so you have to do things in the right way and be on time in order to succeed in North America. Learning. One source of information is used. Thinking proceeds from specific to general. Okay, so that's basically it. Like I said, it's all of it is they're two very different beings, and you guys coming from India, coming to the US, Canada, you're gonna see a huge culture shock. Everything you know, if you do the opposite, you'll be successful here. Gerd Hofstede's dimensions of national culture. I'm not going to get too much into this. You guys have to read this one yourself. But there's so basically he talks about 5 dimensions of culture. So power distance, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation. So this is not going to be too. It's not going to be too important. So power distance is the willingness of a culture to accept status and power differences among its members. Very straightforward. In an individualistic culture, people are expected to portray themselves as individuals who seek to accomplish their individual goals. In collectivistic cultures, people have great emphasis on the welfare of the entire group to which the individual belongs. Okay, so if you're looking at these, it's just basically what different types of cultures how they behave, right? Then you have masculinity versus femininity, right? So like, are men and women segregated into groups where the men are supposed to do like, all the hunting and this and that, and the women are supposed to stay home and do all that, right? Uncertainty avoidance is referring to lack of tolerance of ambiguity, right? So there's a lot of people who stay away. There's a lot of countries or cultures that stay away from things that they don't know, right? And they need rules and policies. They don't want things to be coming out of the blue. It's okay, this is the rule, we follow these rules. Long-term orientation, right? So acceptance that business results may take time to achieve. The employee wishes a long relationship with the company. And then there's short-term orientation, which is things can be reached within a certain time frame, and employee will change employers very often. So you need to know about these things before you go into a different country, right? Okay, guys, so environmental sensitivities. So this is basically about people who that happen in people's lives, right? Like they get exposed to stuff like cleaning product, detergent, scented products, paints, petrochemicals, cigarettes, smoke, pesticides, pets, plants, fuels, all that stuff. And it makes people unable to tolerate the places that they're in, like their homes or their schools or their offices, and they start doing things that are out of the norm because they don't know what's happening. Something is bothering them. It could be allergies. It could be something, right? So a lot of people have that stuff. So instead of so in workplaces, sometimes that happens, and people start their work starts to dwindle. They start to do their work starts to take an effect, and the bosses, instead of trying to figure out what's going on because everyone else is accustomed to that stuff, how come this person not fitting in? Okay, we got to replace them. So that's basically how it goes. So and now we're going to understanding political environment for global marketing. Okay, so there's a tendency among some business people to think that politics and law should be left to someone else. Okay, so we're talking about the political environment, about law, regulations, and stuff like that when you're going global. So a lot of people think that law should be left to someone else. However, for international marketing, politics and law play a critical role. While details should be left to the specialists, a general awareness of how the effect of international marketing decisions is essential. Okay, you have to know, you have to have specialists who know exactly what's going on in that target market, but you also have to have a general idea of what's going on. So turbulence of unexpected political or legal issues can damage even the best business plan. Okay, so for example, if Amazon tries to start up in a country in Africa, let's say Nigeria, overnight Nigeria can say, you know what, no more online shopping, online deliveries. That means Amazon has to close down all the billions they spent over there to start it up and to keep it going, to make it start it going. The because the political change can be so quick and so abrupt and it's so unstable that it could just close down, right? Characteristics such as political stability, the attitude of political leaders to foreign and foreign trade, stuff like that. Government actions can influence if the international political context and the target market changes. So basically what we're trying to say is it's extremely important to know the law of that country before you go into that country. International law, so it's also known as public international law, is a set of rules, norms, and standards generally accepted in relations between nations. Okay, there are 5 legal systems in the world today: civil law systems, common law systems, customary law systems, religious legal systems, and mixed legal systems. So what's a civil law system? So rely on written statutes and other legal codes that are constantly updated and which establish legal procedures, punishments, and what can and cannot be brought forth before a court. In a civil law system, a judge merely establishes the facts of a case and applies remedies found in the codified law. France and Germany are 2 examples of countries with civil law systems. So here in civil law systems, um, so it's the courts. So the judge basically takes all the facts of what happened and then comes to a conclusion as to what they're going to do. Okay, that's basically what a civil law system is. So rely on written statutes and other legal codes that are constantly updated. So these are things that are always being updated, right? So they're not going to just use a 100-year-old law and use it for today. They're gonna be updating it all the time in order to make it more fair and in order to make things uh, make the legal system better. Common law systems, so it's a law that's not written down as legislation, so nothing's written down. Common law involves a system of rules based on precedent. There is a rule that guides judges in making later decisions in similar cases. The common law cannot be found in any code or body of legislation, but only in past decisions. Okay, so U.S. has a common law system. It's the most legal one. It's the most common one. So basically, a lot of times the judges and the jury they base their verdict on what happened a lot in the past, what worked, what didn't work, stuff like that. Customary law systems. They're usually unwritten, often dispensed by elders, passed down through generations. So it's just custom, right? So if something happened back in the day, and the elders or the previous generation made a decision, they usually just follow those. Okay. Religious legal systems are legal systems that are just based off religion, right? So like many Islamic nations have legal systems based in whole or in part on the Quran. So they run their entire country based off the Quran. And the mixed legal system is just a mix of two or more of the ones we just talked about. It has two or more of those combined. Okay, so legal issues during global marketing. Okay, so there's a few common ones that come up when you're doing global marketing. The first one is the legal structure. So you have to make sure you're familiar with employment legalities and business in target country. If you don't, then you can come into some serious lawsuits. So you got to make sure you know what the legal structure is. You have to protect your intellectual property. So you have to know how to protect your product from imitation in target country. So let's just say you go into China and try to sell a product there. Chinese people will just rip that off completely. So you got to know how to protect it. Legal and political climate of a target country. Extremely difficult to grow a business in unstable political economy. Like we said, Africa is very difficult to grow in there right now because it's very unstable. And then knowing your country laws still apply to you. So you have to know that, yes, you are doing business in Africa, but you also have to follow the rules of Canada and US, right? So you have to follow your own rules while you're doing the business out there. So that these are the issues that come up with a lot of businesses. They don't follow those rules of both countries. Okay, so some reasons for international business conflict. Let's say you're doing business internationally. What are the issues that could come up, right? What's the reason why a lot of people, like if I'm here in Canada, why am I fighting with my supplier in India? That's because payment terms, right? People are, if people are dis, they're they're dissatisfied with the quality of the work or of the product or stuff like that, they won't want to pay, and you already sent that product to them, and they're like, oh, I don't want to pay anymore, stuff like that. So letters of guarantee, like we talked about, letters of credit. They can arise in situations where the seller is performing according to the terms of the contract, but the buyer drew on the letter of guarantee to obtain additional funds for liquidity purposes. This is known as wrongful call. Okay. Exchange rates, even a slight shift in the foreign exchange rate can make a tremendous difference in the profit margin for buyers, sellers. That happens all the time. So when I'm trying to sell into the US, I always have to look at the exchange rates to see, okay, do I lock in the exchange rate now, or should I wait a little bit and see if the exchange rate goes up? Maybe I can make a little bit more money. If I wait, it could go down. I can lose more money. Maybe I should lock it in. Okay, so then you lock in your foreign exchange. So that's basically, exchange rates are a very, very big reason of conflict. Documentation errors, right? Errors in letter of credit, letters of guarantees, or contracts can become the focus of disputes and exasperated by language and cultural differences. Okay, so when you're going up against a guy in India for something that happened to your business, it's very difficult to talk about the language and all that stuff because they're completely different, right? US guy talking with a Indian guy, it gets a little tough. Indirect confrontation for resolving international business conflict. Many cultures in the Eastern Hemisphere prefer an indirect handling of conflict, which include, so these are ways to resolve conflict indirectly, not in front of the person, not directly to them. The way they do it is they prioritize and preservation of interpersonal relationships. So they try and say, okay, you know what, hey, listen, we had an issue. We are amicable. We are friends. We are good business partners. Let's try to fix it. So they rely on subtle signaling rather than overt actions, right? So don't like go crazy and say, oh, I'm going to sue you. I'm going to do that. No, you just say, hey, listen, I'm going to have to hold back on this shipment because we didn't really receive money for our past shipment, and we really need it in order to fulfill the shipment for you. A tendency toward the suppression of outward emotion. So make sure you're not going crazy, you're not going angry and all that stuff. You just try to be calm. Frequent employment of apologies, expressions, or remorse rather than of guilt. So always say, hey, apologize, show them that you're remorseful if you made a mistake. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I want to fix it, right? And involvement of a third party from the start rather than near the end. So what people usually do is, if you have an end customer, to make things a lot more smoother, there is a third party in the middle, which is a broker, which we used to use. We were a Canadian company. We would use a broker into the United States who would act as the middleman for both of us. Okay, so they would be the ones who knew all the rules and everything and said, okay, this has to be done, this. And if there was an error, they would be the ones in the middle saying, okay, the error came from this end. This is the end that the error came from. You guys have to fix it, basically. Okay, guys. So you guys have a quiz due next week, just like our global business environment, right? Like I said, everything moves exactly the same. There'll be a video posted this class with questions to answer, and then questions will be marked for your attendance and participation. So we will go live today. We will be asking people questions, and we will be grading people based off of the questions that they answer. And if you're in class, you're going to be getting attendance. So the same thing as always. But next week, everything from week 1 to week 3 is going to be on the quiz. Okay, guys, I'll see you guys in class.